everyone, and welcome to the HearthFire. So today I am making bread for Lughnasadh. So I hope you'll join me in this adventure. Now, I love baking bread. I love being in the kitchen and baking stuff, but bread is one of those things that I've never had a lot of success with. So bread's always been a bit of a challenge. However, this particular recipe that I've got actually works, and I've been making it for the last 4 or 5 years, specifically for Lughnasadh, and it's always turned out pretty good. So it's called an easy egg bread recipe, and I actually got it off of Pinterest. So Lughnasadh is the first of the harvest festivals. So it lands halfway between the summer solstice and the autumn equinox. It is primarily a grain harvest festival. Now here in Saskatchewan, we're still a few weeks away from our grain harvest, so we are celebrating the harvest from the garden, but we are preparing for that grain harvest. So when you look on the wheel of the year, Lughnasadh lands opposite of Imbolc. So Imbolc is in February. Imbolc is the first of what they call the spring festivals. The wheel of the year is based on a lot of British, Celtic European traditions, folk traditions. So quite often the wheel of the year doesn't quite line up for us. But in Imbolc, we are planting the garden. We're looking for our seeds. We're planning what kind of seeds we're going to grow. So Lughnasadh marks the first harvest of those seeds that we put in the ground. Okay, so it is one of the traditional things, of course, for Lughnasadh is bread of any kind. So that's what I'm going to do today. So now it is a braided loaf, so we're going to get busy and make some bread. We'll do it in stages. It's probably the best way to do it, because like most breads, it does take time. You do have to let it rise a couple of times before you bake it off. So that's what we're going to do. So I will put the recipe down in the comments section so you can try it yourself if you want, or you can just do a Google search for it. Or I've been told that any kind of bread recipe that is intended for doing braided loaves would work for this. So because that's what we're going to do, is braided. So so I have 4 cups of flour in my bowl, and I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of sugar. 1, 2, and then it calls for 2 teaspoons of salt, so we're going to do that. Get my salt going here. Yeah, so I'm in Glenn's kitchen at the farm, so I'm not using my own stuff. You can mix the dough up in a mix master in a machine, which is what I would normally do, but I don't have access to one out here on the farm, so we're just going to do it by hand, the old-fashioned way. So that's 2 teaspoons of salt. And then we're going to add the yeast. It says to add the yeast. So flour, yeast, sugar, salt. So yeast it's 1 packet of active dry yeast, or if you have like the bulk yeast, it's 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast. So this is what I'm using. I'm in Glenn's kitchen, so I'm using what he's got. So there's 1, 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast. So there we go. So now I'm just going to mix this all in by hand, just like that. So Lughnasadh is the start of the harvest season. We have been harvesting vegetables for a few weeks now, but it marks the first festival, and it also kind of marks the waning of the summer. Okay, so Lughnasadh it's the 1st of August, 1st or 2nd of August, and it does kind of mark that change in the season. The days are shorter, the sun sets earlier, and so the summer is waning, and which is kind of sad because it feels like our growing season just got underway, even though we are 2 to 3 weeks behind on everything in the garden. So there's the yeast mixed up. Now next it says Now I actually did this step earlier. It calls for half a cup of water, half a cup of milk, and 2 tablespoons of butter or shortening. And it said to put them in a saucepan and let them warm. Now I did that earlier. I'll just go grab the pan. So this is my milk, water, and butter mixture. Now just reading my recipe, make sure I get it right. Okay, so like I said, you could do this with a mix master. It's probably easier this way. So now it just says to slowly add the mixture, the milk mixture. Just like that. We'll add a little bit, and then we'll mix it all up, stir it in. Okay, now it also calls for egg, so I'm gonna beat my eggs, and we'll get those in as well. It calls for 3 eggs. Now I've got some lovely farm eggs that Glenn got from a friend. Whoops, my bad. Oh, this is a live, somewhat live video. So we're just gonna beat up the egg. Like that. Okay, now I'm just going to double check my recipe. Yeah. Okay, so that's all beaten up. I just wanted to make sure that was good to go ahead of time. We are going to continue to add the milk. Another go of the milk. There we go. We'll mix that up some more, and then we'll add the beaten egg. It's been a while since I've done a kitchen video, a HearthFire video, so I have to admit, being in the kitchen makes me a little more nervous, but whatever. Okay, now we're going to add the beaten egg. There we go. I'll set that off to the side. Just like that. Now, I love the harvest season. I love, springtime is all awesome. I love planting. I love getting the seeds going and growing and all that. But I do love the harvest season. I love all the vegetables, and I love seeing, the farmers markets and everything, all the fruit, the soft fruit that's available this time. So, okay. We got this mixed in. All right. Now, I'm just going to try to give it a really good mix. There we go. So it's a fairly firm dough, as it should be, and those lovely golden yolks have made it a nice, lovely color. There we go. So now I'm going to grab some extra flour so that we can work it on the counter here. Now, I haven't, like I said, I've made this recipe before. I've had reasonable success with it, but I've decided I'm going to change it up a bit. I am going to add a little bit of fresh dill from the garden. So I'm hoping this will work and that it won't throw everything out too badly. I'm just going to grab some flour. Okay. There we go. There we go, all ready to go. And we're going to scrape this out onto the counter here. Now we've been having some interesting weather. I don't know, I guess you could consider what's going on to be a little bit of climate change. We've had some extreme weather conditions. This morning we went out to the farmer's market in Loon Lake, which is about a 40-minute drive from here. And while we were there, we heard that here in Meadow Lake, it just poured rain. It's like it just came down in buckets apparently, and which is good because the garden definitely needed to be watered. So now we're kind of grateful for that, but it also needs to be weeded. So, but it's like extremes. Like I remember days where you would get a rainy day where it would be a nice gentle rain, and it would rain the whole day, and then it would sink into the ground, and we don't have those anymore. We have these downpours that are just almost devastating, and they don't soak in, and it just seems like we have just extremes. We've had extreme hot weather, and then when we got back from Loon Lake today, it we kind of took a few minutes to ourselves to rest, and then when we went outside, it was here the clouds had cleared off, and it was just as hot as blazes out, hot. So which is probably going to fuel some more storms. So now I'm just going to knead this dough for a few minutes, get it all nice and worked in. Now the dill I'm probably going to add at the second step, which is where we would braid it. So that's when I'll add the dill. I'm pretty sure that's probably the right time to add it. I don't, like I said, my experience with making bread is limited and doesn't always turn out, but I thought I'd experiment with the adding of the dills. So something different. Work that. Okay. Just give it a few more pats. It's quite a sticky dough. Mind you, we've got a lot of humidity here right now, and the humidity will affect things apparently. So I'm told. Like I said, I'm not the most experienced baker, even though I love being in the kitchen and doing it. But there we go. Looks good. Yes, so Lughnasadh, it's hard to believe that July is almost over. And that Lughnasadh is here in August, and it's like, holy crap, the summer is waning so fast. Unbelievably fast. It's like, where do the days go? And there's so much to do. We've got so much, there's weeding to do, and of course, the rain has definitely helped. Like we were struggling trying to keep it watered, everything, and weeded. But the rain will help with the watering, but we still have to weed. And of course, the rain and the heat will just make everything jump up and just spur everything on. Like things are still 2 to 3 weeks behind where they were last year. So I'm not sure what to make of that. Some things we got corn coming along. It's just the stuff that seemed a bit short has just jumped right up. It's flowering, and the bees are finally in the garden. We were noticing that there weren't a lot of bees in the garden earlier, but now they seem to be there. So that's a good sign. There we go. That's looking not bad for a ball of bread dough. I'm happy with that. I think that might be good. Now it says to let it rise for about an hour and a half. So that's what I'll do. I'll put it in a bowl with a little oil on it, and then I'll cover it with some plastic wrap, and then we'll let it rise. And then we'll braid it. See you in a bit. All right, look at that. An hour and a half later, and our dough has risen. It's basically doubled in size, so now we are going to shape it. All right, so welcome back. So as you can see, our dough has risen nicely. It's doubled in size. And we're going to, first thing I'm going to do is I want to mix in the fresh dill, and then we are going to shape it. Basically, we're going to make a braided loaf. So first thing I'm going to do is sprinkle a little bit of flour down on the counter again so it doesn't stick. And then I'm going to turn the dough out onto the counter. Now, this is the first time that I've ever tried adding any herbs to it, so I'm not totally sure how this is going to turn out. Your guess is good as mine, so I'm just going to sprinkle it all in here. Sprinkle all the dill, and then we're just going to kind of work it in. Knead it a few times, which I know with bread you have to be careful that you don't overwork it, so I think that's sort of a fine line maybe, I don't know. So we're just going to knead it, give it a few turns. Get all that lovely fresh dill. Oh, it smells amazing, that fresh dill. I tell you, we took some to the market and it just, oh, it made the car smell wonderful. That fresh dill. Okay, so that looks good. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shape it into sort of a thick log like this. And I'm just going to grab a knife. There we go. Hope you can still see this. Gotta adjust my iPad here so you can see. Sorry. Yeah, Facebook Live. We're really cooking in the kitchen, okay? Okay, so I'm going to cut this into hopefully 3 equal pieces. Something like that, like about that. There we go, okay. Okay, so there's one. Oops, there we go, there's 2 and 3. So, I've got my pan all ready to go. I've got some parchment paper on my baking sheet. So now we just take each piece and we roll it out. Basically, you want to stretch it out into a strand, as long as you want it to be. I always find this to be tricky, getting it to be the same thickness all the way along. It's always what I've found to be the most challenging part. So I'm just going to roll it and stretch it out to try and get it as long as I can. There we go. That's working a little bit better, sort of. There we go. Stretch it out a bit more. Just like that. There we go. So there's strand number 1. That looks good enough. Let's set it aside. We're going to do strand number 2. Again, same process, just rolling it and stretching it out. Just like that. Seems to be going a little easier with this one. There we go. We'll set that aside. It's roughly the same length. There we go. And then piece number 3. We'll just roll it and stretch it again. There we go. Almost there. A little bit more. Just like that. Okay, now I found it easier to actually, to braid the loaf, to actually braid it on the pan. It's easier to braid it on the pan rather than trying to move the whole thing once it's braided. So I'm just going to do that. We're just going to put strands on there. There we go. So now you basically, it's just a simple braid. Just a simple 3-strand braid. You can start however you want. I always find, let's see here. Getting it going is always, there we go. That one there. Sometimes the end of it always works out better than the beginning of it, it seems. Okay. So it's just a basic, and you know what, with something like this you can get as simple or as complicated as you want. And of course I prefer to go simple. Probably because my confidence in making bread isn't that great. So just a simple 3-strand braid works best for me. There we go, and I'm just going to work. Let's see here. Do the top end here. Okay. So now what you want to do with the ends when you get there is just kind of tuck them underneath. So my end always ends up looking nicer than the top part. I don't know why that is, but this seems to be the way the bread works for me. I'm just going to shift this back over so it's going to fit the pan. Now, once you've got your loaf braided, I'm just going to tuck this back under here a little bit more as best I can. We're going to let this rest or rise for another hour, and then we're going to bake it off. Now, what I've done in the past with this, I've actually done 2 loaves, and where I've divided the dough in half, and then each half I've split into 3 and braided each one, and one I will shape around like a mason jar to shape it into a circle, and the other one I've left long like this. So the circle represents the goddess, and of course the long one represents the god. So you can do that if you want. So you have both. So it looks kind of nice if you're having a feast for Lughnasadh. It looks really nice as a table center. So now we've got our bread braided. We're gonna let it rise for about another hour or so, and then like I said, we'll put it in the oven. All right, so we're back, and our bread has risen, and it looks really good. So the last step is to brush it with some egg. This is a beaten egg with a little bit of milk in it, and what this will do is brown it. It'll brown it really nice, and then after that, it can go in the oven at 450 degrees for about half an hour. And then we will have a lovely loaf of Lughnasadh bread to enjoy for this first harvest Sabbath. I'm just going to brush it. You want to brush it all over. You want to make sure that it's nicely covered, because then it really does make it brown nicely in the oven. Make sure you get it all into all of those nooks and crannies for the braid. There we go, here at the top, on this side here. All right, so that is ready for the oven. I'm gonna pop it in, and then I'll show you the finished loaf when it's ready. And here we have it, a very, very fine loaf of Lughnasadh bread. Isn't that gorgeous? And it smells even wonderful. There's nothing better than the smell of freshly baked bread. I think it's just the best way to make a house smell wonderful is by baking bread. So thank you so much for joining me in the kitchen around the hearth fire. I hope you're having a great weekend. Here in Saskatchewan, it's a long weekend, so happy long weekend. Happy Lughnasadh to those who celebrate, and we'll be talking to you again real soon. Take care.